Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 291. Who is John Galt? Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and I was going to take a day off. Uh, there's an inauguration, which I refuse to watch. And then there are, of course, stories about pardons and more pardons and preemptive pardons. And so clearly the criminals are going to get away again. And so it was kind of thought I'd unplug from everything, and I watched Atlas Shrugged Part One. Um, I watched it when it first came out, and I made all the kids in my church watch it, and it was interesting, but then not interesting enough for me to get everyone to get all excited about Part Two and Three. And then they had all the actors change, which made it kind of, I don't know. You have to really like the story in order to continue to watch, even though they changed all of the faces, even though they're supposed to all be the same people. Anyway, there's that. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but anyway, there was that as well. So Atlas Shrugged is a novel by Ayn Rand. Okay. And this was an adaptation of that book into a movie. I have a copy of the novel. I haven't cracked it yet. And so the movie was just kind of an easy way for me to get through it, to get a general idea of what is in it. And so, not to give anything away, I hate what do you call them? People who give away a story. I'm blanking on the expression anyway. Just to give you an overview, what would happen if the best and the brightest stopped supporting the socialists of the world? And what I mean by socialists, those who don't really work, whose work is only to sponge off of people who are successful or to slow down the work of those who are identified as being too successful. And so watching the movie, I was thinking, wow, these characters are a little bit too extreme to the point of a caricature, right? Good guys are, well, they're good because all they do is they care about money. And so these are the good guys, right? So they're not greedy, they're not evil because all they think about is money, but they're actually the people who make the world go around. And then, of course, all of the politicians and, what people who we would call woke, they are kind of over the top, super lazy, super political, and it's kind of obvious that they are the villains of the society. And so I thought, wow, it's kind of a little bit much, right? It's like but then I was thinking, but especially for young people or a lot of people who refuse to acknowledge it, they've been taught not to see uh, the obvious. And so maybe you have to be this obvious in order for people to even realize that there's a story here, right? Um, so again, the people who are successful are in it only for money. There's just nothing other than money. Everything that drives them is money. And then you got socialist politicians and activists and lobbyists on the other side, and they're all lazy, self-absorbed, self-righteous authoritarians who are emboldened by their moral certainty, right? And so the question comes up, why carry them? Why carry the socialists, right? They're not doing anything. Uh, I'm just highlighting some things that I thought were kind of interesting. So there's a bracelet scene made from the first pour of the new steel. And Reardon's wife wanted diamonds, and all she got was this new steel. And I thought it was interesting considering, um, I don't think artificial diamonds were known when Ayn Rand wrote her novel, but isn't it kind of interesting? Diamonds are just simply rocks, and you can create them. You can have man-made diamonds that are uh, better in quality than the natural ones. And so one can see this sort of subjective theory of value going on here. Then there's a scientific institute, which I thought was kind of interesting because this would have been pre-Cervasis, but that the Science Institute is not for science, but rather it's for government propaganda. And so the people who work there only issue papers that become hit pieces or to discredit, to publish smear jobs, create false confidence or false skepticism. And so reality, actual quality or defect or potential risks, not the point, right? That's not what the scientific institute is for. It's just merely servicing the agenda of the government. There's a constant undercurrent uh, or slash explanation that if you are hiring for one's politics and appearance, uh, that's more important than ability. And I think it's pretty obvious right now. People elect politicians based on their appearance rather than their qualifications. The things that they say rather than whether they'll actually be do a good job or not. Reardon is the character there, and he has a steel company, and he's making this brand new steel. And it kind of reminds me of Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller, right? Who were so good at what they did, and they were able to create such an efficient, you know, production that no one could compete with them. Not only did he have efficiency and lots of different components of the steelmaking process under his direction, but he had innovation as well. He had this great idea, which made the steel that he was producing stronger and lighter than anything else that was available. uh, so people tried to buy his company, but he says, at a huge profit, right? And owner Reardon refused because it's his company. And I've said this a lot in class, that if you have a great idea, who's to stop a large company from buying you out? Well, because they have to buy you out. And if you are unwilling to sell, then no matter how much money they're going to offer, it'll never be enough. It's sort of like the nail houses. I'm pretty sure I talked about them, where if you're ever in a situation where property rights are actually respected, then you can't lose your house because of eminent domain. And so people have to build around you. And if you look up nail houses, you'll see examples of nail houses all over the place. The movie Up with the balloons, that is based on one of those nail houses, right? This old lady refused to sell her house, and so this corporate business mall was built around her house, right? And it was only after she passed away that people were able to get inside of her house and realize, oh, she was actually an interesting person. In any case, the point is that just because you're going to offer someone a lot of money doesn't mean that that person is going to sell. And so, yeah, you will always be able to have competition. Very, very difficult to have a true monopoly in the sense that competition is illegal. You will always have competition because for some people, it's just doing it their way, being the boss of their own company. It's their idea. And so they're never going to sell. I thought it was interesting that the two companies, primary companies that are in the movie, Taggart Transcontinental Rail and Reardon Steel, they were making a bullet train. And we still don't have a bullet train here in the United States. China has got a whole lot. Japan has had them since the 1970s. And I'm sure that during the time of Ayn Rand, that maybe she wasn't talking about a bullet train, but a super fast train. Uh, because unless, of course, she wrote it after the bullet trains were already invented. But in any case, you have this interesting thing where they want to build a bullet train and they be able to transport people quickly and efficiently and probably more cheaply, right? Because you don't have the accidents that the other trains have. And we don't have a bullet train today, right? And so this kind of is this sort of backhanded way or backdoor way of explaining why there is no bullet train here in the United States. So in this movie, success is bad and great success is evil, right? Because you're so successful, other people can't compete, and that's unfair. Uh, it's not supposed to be that way. And then you have 20th Century Motor Company, which is this company that comes up in the context of new technology and being a great company. Well, so the pundits would say, "Oh, they did it right. Workers got paid according to their need, not according to the value of the contribution they made to the company." And as a result, the people, the best and the brightest of the company and left behind those who were less capable, and the business collapsed soon after that. And so you can kind of see that that's the microcosm of the macrocosm, the world, right? So here's one company which did what so many people believe governments and the whole world should do, and it is an utter failure, right? So the best and the brightest quit and they left, which left behind people who were not as able to, pick up the slack. Uh, who is in the position to make demands? Are union workers in the position to make demands of the people who are paying them? And we're reminded that unions are protected. They're protected by the government. They can do anything they want. Employers can do very little, like they can't do anything unless they want to have the government, lean in on them. And so union workers can demand things of their bosses because of the government protections that they have, such as you can't fire them if they go on strike. Uh, but it's interesting, right? That's only showing a very narrow, the movie is only showing a narrow sliver. Most people who talk about unions and the worker only talk about a narrow sliver of the life in a union. And so you have all these things going on. Success is being, punished and penalized. And so there's a lot of frustration on the people who are actually doing the work, innovators and creators. So they basically check out, they shrug, right? So you have that thing. So Atlas, of course, if you know your mythology, he's the guy that was condemned, I think, by Zeus to hold up the world. And so the world, usually when you see a picture of him, he's kneeling and he's got the entire world on his shoulders. Well, he shrugs, right? So that's what happens when he shrugs. Well, it's a huge global phenomena, right? It shakes up the world. And he only shrugged. And so what is the fallout? What happens? And so I'm probably, after I make this episode, I'll probably excuse me, second and third parts. All right. So I agree. I get it. I agree with pretty much all of the points in the movie that I saw. There are a couple of things that I want to, I was like, oh, no, why do you gotta do it like that? And then I'll elaborate. So people other than sociopaths and psychopaths are never really this extreme in terms of only being focused on money or only being focused on, you know, uh, being, the activist mentality. And I don't know, maybe there are people like that now, because of the way society is set up. But I think, yeah, that is an atypical phenomena. I don't think the CEO, well, I take that back, except for maybe one possible person who's in charge of Facebook. But other than that, most people have feelings. Most people have compassion. And so even the wealthy, if they're not only fixated on money, that's their only thing. I mean, they have feelings. There's empathy. And it is those feelings and empathy that social justice warriors get you, right? They appeal to you. They get you feeling guilty, and so then you cut those checks, right? You make donations to their endeavors. Well, in the movie that is brought out, I think that's why the characters are so simple to read, right? Because there are a lot of people today who don't see it, who don't get it. So the heroes, as a result, are kind of unlovable, while the hateful characters spout off all the good points that we're supposed to agree with. And this is why there's this weird tension that could have been portrayed a little bit. I don't know if it's the novel or if it's the director, but there it is. They're just too, the characters are just too simplistic, perhaps might be a way of saying it. Also, all these successful people, they drop out of society, right? They disappear, as it were. And the implication, of course, is that they disappear to live in a utopian society. And so everyone who's left, they're mediocre, they don't have the brains or the know-how of how to take care of, you know, very serious problems. And there's no one left to do the work, in other words. Um, And so I thought that this was kind of interesting and maybe not, right? To think that genius only happens in certain places among a certain group of people, and once they die, it'll never happen again. No, I think the people who have already been successful, their success came when there were very few regulations. These days, no matter how smart you are, how great your idea is, because of all the regulations, because of the Federal Reserve, people can't get their idea off the ground. And going back to what I always say, innovation, creativity are are when we are faced with challenges, when we have a problem, or when we have run out of knowledge. Okay, and so then we have to think of a solution, and that's where innovation happens. That's where creativity is generated. People are trying to find an alternate solution because the choices that we have now and that we're exercising are not yielding benefit. And so, what else is out there? And in order to come up with those innovative, creative ideas, we need freedom. We need freedom of ideas. And it might be that some ideas are not as good as other. Like just say, for example, all the successful people of the movie, they all left, and anyone who was left, they're just simply not smart enough to do the job of these mental giants, intellectual giants. Well, while it is possible that most people are just not as great as previous great people, but we're all human, right? And there's what, 6 to 8 billion of us now? I lost track. Uh, but there's always going to be more ideas. The question is, how do we have those ideas heard, right? And so I think it's a combination of having a great idea, having a great audience, and also a great medium through which your ideas get to be shared with other people. Uh, so in that situation, getting people to wrestle with problems with freedom, um, they just need more knowledge, and we just have to sit back and see what's invented, right? And so, on the one hand, if all the successful people sort of disappear from society, then we're all screwed. Not necessarily, right? Because others will rise to the occasion, and that's kind of the movie doesn't bring that out, and that was part of that caricature aspect of the movie that I mentioned earlier. You know, uh, it's a wonder how with all of these preemptive pardons now, it's a wonder that people still believe the government and all of their propagandas. Some people will say, "Oh, I don't like the government either," but as soon as their issue, whether it's Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia, whatever, but when that issue comes up, all of a sudden they're in love with their government again. And so what we can see is that it is very difficult to be consistent in our anti-government position just because sometimes they say things that we like. And so we want people to say it more. And so you're going to support, the general state. Ayn Rand, I think I would have gotten along with her. Most people get turned off by her. I don't know if you've ever seen her talk. She's very, very intellectual. They say that her philosophy of thinking is objectivism, which, of course, doesn't have much room for empathy, all those emotions that she blasts in the movie. So she was uber, I could have gotten along with. I think she would have been unable to handle me in the sense of too much religion. Like she'd be able to argue with me, of course, but I don't think she would be able to put up with me and be tolerant of all my super Jesus views, right? So she was an uber rationalist. But at some point, she's gotta come around to see the reality of morality and the effect on the human mind. And so the characters that are, so uncaring about the public and, the effects that their policies have on the public, and for them to sort of make these cold calculations that they project onto free market proponents, it's interesting, right? But I think I would have been able to get her to at least not kick me out of her house, right? But to look at and think things in a subjective kind of way. So she's all about the objectivism. I'm all about subjectivity. Maybe there's somewhere in between where she would be persuaded to move, right? Like, not that I would change my position, obviously. So if you've ever seen her, she does come off like a robot, but she was married and she had an affair for like a long time. Uh, I don't know if her husband knew about it or not, but so clearly she has emotions. And when they do show up, I mean, they are off the hook kind of emotional, right? So, yeah, I think that she would have come around eventually um, to the idea that morality and good are subjective. It's not this objective thing, if that's what she was trying to say. And we just have to leave it to the people to decide, which I think she would agree to, right? It's because of the activities of government and politicians that you have the weird situations that come up in society where there is no accountability. And we're watching it right now when Biden does all the things that he does without any fear of repercussions or prison or anything like that, then you begin to understand, you know, uh, that we're living in the time of an Atlas Shrugged, um, right? So yeah, it was just an interesting movie. You might want to watch it with those things in mind, right? That she's trying to get the message, or at least that's the way it comes off. She's beating a dead horse, making it obvious how you're supposed to think and feel. And perhaps the reality of life is just a little bit more subtle. But always, 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 freedom is the most important. And through this freedom, we can sort of discover what is moral, what is good. It is not necessarily an objective truth. Anyway, I'm not a Ayn Rand expert, so I might have gotten something wrong on her ideas, but nevertheless, those were my thoughts on the movie. I will talk to you next time.